Ever had a guest call you after their episode drops and say, hey, actually, could you take that one down for me, please? Well, unfortunately, this happens more often than you might think. Now, maybe they didn't like how they sounded. Maybe they got a new job and their comments became suddenly problematic. Or maybe they just got cold feet about having their voice online forever. And if you don't have a signed guest release, well, you might have no choice but to take it down, even if that episode is one of your best, even if it cost you money, time, energy, resources, those kinds of things to produce. And even if it's been up for months, you might have to take it down. That's why in today's episode, I am breaking down what a podcast guest release actually is, why it matters so much, and what it needs to say to protect your show and your reputation and your business. I'm Gordon Firemark, the podcast lawyer, and this is Legit Podcast Pro, where we help serious podcasters like you to build professional-grade shows, grow your audience, and protect your content, all without spending a fortune on legal fees. Now, one guest release, that might sound like one of those optional things that only big studios worry about, but if you interview people on your show, whether they're celebrities or your old college roommate or neighbor down the street, you are relying on their permission to record and publish and promote that conversation. And unless that permission is in writing, well, you might be building on kind of shaky ground. So today we're going to cover why guest releases matter legally, the specific clauses that should be included in your guest release, how to handle it smoothly with guests so it's not a high friction kind of a thing, and what not to do so you can avoid the biggest legal mistakes that I see podcasters make every week. So, number one, let's start with the why. When somebody appears on your show, you are not just recording their words, you're recording a performance and their consent for that recording. And that performance itself, their voice, their likeness, their story, all belongs to them under U.S. laws of privacy and copyright and other things. So without a written release, you are technically using that. Well, you're recording them without consent. You are using that performance without a clear authorization. And even if you rely on the implicit authorization, the scope of what's allowed is pretty up in the air and open-ended because there's nothing clear in writing. That means that if they decide later that they don't like something that they said or how it was edited or how you promoted it, or maybe they don't like you anymore, they could demand that you remove that episode completely. And yes, they could even threaten legal action. I've seen it happen. So one podcaster I know had a guest talk about a workplace discrimination situation, and the episode went viral. And a few weeks later, the guest's employer got wind of it and pressured her to demand that it be taken down. There was no written release on file, so down it came. Now, in that scenario, if someone's going to lose their job because they went on your podcast and you're the host of the show, you might think twice about standing firm on not taking it down. But it should be your decision, your choice, whether or not to take down the episode. Now, in this instance, that show lost an episode that had thousands of downloads and press coverage and sponsors and all of that, all because they had skipped this one small step. Isn't it better just to get something in writing that says, hey, I consent to you recording and publishing and using what I've said, and I swear up and down that everything I say is true, and you can own the content, that kind of thing. So here are the things that a good release really needs to include. Let's break it down. First off is the permission, the consent to be recorded and use that. That is the foundation of the guest release. The guest is giving you permission to capture their voice, their likeness, their name, their biographical information, and their performance, and to use all of those things in any way connected with your show or your business. Usually you want to include the right to edit and distribute and repurpose the content because you need the flexibility so you can cut together short form stuff to promote your show, or maybe you just need to cut down the length of the show, or you want to, edit some things for clarity, or maybe just to fit a particular format. And you want to repurpose that interview later, maybe as a YouTube clip, a social post, a quote. Maybe you want to use transcripts from your recordings in a book that you might put out on a subject related to your show. Maybe it's a graphic or even part of a future course or a documentary film or something like that. Well, if you don't have the written consent for all those kinds of things, well, without those rights, your hands could be tied. So you also want to include a waiver of claims. Now, this is your legal shield. It's what protects you against claims like defamation and invasion of privacy or misrepresentation. Basically, the guest is agreeing that they participated voluntarily and they are waiving their rights to sue you for anything related to the content of the show. And they understand, they're acknowledging that they know you might edit or promote the episode and they aren't going to sue you later because they just don't like how it came out or they just don't agree with something that you said later on. So you also want to make sure, that the guest is not getting any, or at least not getting meaningful approval rights that would interfere with your ability to do what you need to do to publish and promote your show. The guest should not have a right of absolute approval or sign off on the final edit. This is your creative control. It's your show, your resources going into it, and you don't want to lose those things. If you do give approval rights, you are basically turning every episode, every edit into a potential negotiation. And believe me, I've seen this go wrong where a guest keeps insisting on more and more changes, basically eviscerating the show or costing the creator a ton of money for edits and revisions and things like that. And eventually it just becomes not worth it at some point, right? So another thing to include in your release is an authorization to use the AI tools that are available to edit the show, to sweeten the sound quality, to improve it basically, and as well to make derivative works from the original. That's the book that I was referring to earlier is a derivative work based on the podcast recordings. You want to make sure that you include those things. And as a cautionary measure, I have edited the podcast release form that I'm going to tell you about in a couple of minutes to include a specific authorization to use AI tools for editing, sweetening, post-production, and so on, with the caveat that those changes will not change the meaning of the words the guest said or the general character and nature of their appearance. That's important. All right, so these are new things. We live in this era of AI-assisted production, automated transcriptions, and things like that. And using those things can be fraught with some danger if you don't have the explicit consent to use them. So be careful about that. Your release should also give permission for a reasonable use of those tools, reasonable promotion, reasonable marketing of the show. After all, you want to get people. So you just need to make it clear that you're not going to manipulate their words, their voice, or their image to create new or misleading content. And that's sort of the balance you have to find out. Permission to do the things you need to do, provided that you're not going to do things that go beyond that would be harmful to the person or their reputation. Another thing the release form really needs to include is perpetual rights, in perpetuity. That is that the release and the waiver, they last forever. Because podcasts live online really indefinitely. As long as somebody's paying the bill for that hosting, it's going to be up there somewhere. And it might even be up there even after the hosting expires. So the guest should be granting those rights to all of the rights, the consent and the right to publish and all that in perpetuity, not just for a year at a time or just specific to one platform, because you never know what's going to happen, what's going to change in a few months or a few years. So when all of these 6 points are covered, you're protected for just about anything you might want to do to use that episode now or in the future. Watch for that language, that any all media, whether now known or hereafter devised. Pretty broad, expansive coverage. Another thing you might want to say is throughout the universe, not just throughout the world or the English-speaking language, right? Never just specify it's just a podcast or it's just on Spotify or something like that. You want to keep your options open. Now, some common mistakes that podcasters make. Let's talk about what folks get wrong. First off, assuming that verbal consent is enough, that showing up to talk into a microphone in front of a camera, that is enough consent. Well, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. That implied consent comes along with certain assumptions about what's included and what's not, right? Well, assumptions are dangerous. You shouldn't assume that the guest had the same understanding of what you were doing as you did. Maybe they thought you were just recording it for an in-house use. Maybe they thought you were only going to release it on Apple Podcasts and then it comes on Spotify and it takes them by surprise. Maybe they weren't expecting to see the video on YouTube, but they were expecting to see it on Instagram. Who knows what? Anyway, being able to just say, I told them I was recording or they agreed on the Zoom call doesn't really hold up. Now, you can record the full verbal consent, but you have to remember the words that you need to say, including the words irrevocable, in perpetuity, throughout the known universe, all of that. It's important. A written release really is the gold standard. Now, mistake number 2 is using generic forms that you find online or you get to an AI to spit out for you. Most of the free templates miss these key clauses, or especially around the derivative works and the AI editing and ownership of the intellectual property and those kinds of things. And it is a little bit of a fine line because a lot of guests get tripped up by this idea that somehow they're giving you their intellectual property. Well, no, all we're doing is saying we claim ownership of the intellectual property that we are creating together when we make the recording. But anything that is yours that you bring to it beforehand, that's still yours. So that's important. So we want to be careful that our contracts aren't just generic boilerplate templates that are spit out from an AI or an automated system. And lots of them are worded more for television or film and not for podcasts. So even if you're dealing with someone who's an entertainment lawyer like myself, you want to make sure that they've given some real thought to the nature of podcasting itself. And mistake number 3 is also forgetting to include video rights. If you are recording video, whether you're using Zoom or Riverside or StreamYard or Ecamm like I do with this show, that is a separate layer of rights. You are not just recording audio, but you're also capturing the person's likeness and image and the dynamics of their visual performance. So your release should definitely reference all of those kinds of things. Mistake number 4 is skipping this whole existence of a release entirely because it feels awkward or it feels too confrontational to ask someone to sign something before they come on your show. And I get it. You don't want to drive your guests away. But my experience is that when you inject this dose of professionalism into what you're doing, do things the way professional media folks do, it actually builds confidence and builds trust because now everybody knows what's in store. Everybody can trust each other to stick by what they said in the writing, right? So that's good. The other thing is that you can make it very friction-free by just injecting into the process, the signing of the release as part of the calendar scheduling process for your show. So these folks will see it as a sign that you're serious about your show. And you know what? When somebody refuses to sign, I take that as a big red flag. Those same people are the ones who are going to be trouble later on, asking for edits, asking for copies of the footage. Oh, that's an important one, by the way. Lots of times hosts are trying to be generous and give their guest a copy of the footage that they recorded when they made the show. And what happens, as I've seen this often enough that I know to talk about it, the guest will hand over that footage to their assistant or their PR firm or their manager or someone, and that will get edited down to the point that the podcaster is no longer included. The title of the podcast is nowhere there. People are watching this, they're seeing it on social media, and the podcast isn't getting any credit or downloads for the fact that they've made this content. So you're expending your resources to make content for you, not for them. And so I would hesitate to to give that away for free. And if you're going to give footage away, I think you should do the editing yourself. Give them a cut down that presents them in the most optimistic, flattering light that you can. But if you retain ownership of your footage, retain possession of your footage, you won't run into this situation of someone else using your show for purposes that you didn't intend. So, someone refuses to sign, big red flag. You might be dodging a bigger problem down the road if you just decide not to have them on the show. All right, so how do you get your releases signed without killing the vibe, making it as seamless and friction-free as possible? Well, I'd say build it into your automations. Make it a part of your calendar booking process. If you are using Calendly or Acuity Scheduling or any other of these scheduling tools that are out there, you can include the form and a checkbox. Yes, I agree. In the forms that are completed when they sign up to be on your show. And that's a step that, documents the fact that they have indicated their assent to the terms of the agreement. That is the consent to be recorded and have it published. You could link it right before the confirmation page so they can sign before they even see the recording link. You could use a digital signature tool like DocuSign or PandaDoc, or sometimes there are even built-in signature features in Google Forms or Typeform, things like that. And that'll even generate a PDF that you can store in your records. And do keep those good records for organization. Create a folder either in your cloud storage or your project management tool for each episode and drop those signed releases in there along with the show notes, any raw audio files, anything else that you might need. And that way, if you ever need proof, it's all right there in one place tied to the episode, maybe by episode number or title, something like that. And here's a pro tip. Have a short explanation ready for the guests who ask you about this. Why do you need this release? What am I signing? What if I don't want to sign it? And you can say something like, this is a standard release just so we have your consent to record and share your interview. It protects both of us, and 9 times out of 10, they will sign it without any further pushback or a second thought. So let me give you a couple of real scenarios that I've encountered in my practice. First off, podcaster interviewed a celebrity chef who later claimed that the editing made her sound arrogant and obnoxious. So she demanded that the episode be pulled down and threatened a defamation claim against the podcaster. But the podcaster in this case had gotten a signed release. Problem solved. They were legally in the clear, and we were able to say, hey, you knew what you were getting into. You signed here. You indicated you knew what was going to happen. And there you go. Now, another podcaster who didn't use releases, well, after one guest's company was acquired, the new owner, the new parent business, demanded that all appearances be deleted completely from the internet. That creator lost a bunch of their back catalog overnight, and their SEO traffic gone. Same situation, different outcomes. Here's another one. Journalist client has a guest on her show. The guest wants to talk about a particular subject that's a little bit controversial within the subject matter of the podcast. And all was well. Guest had a great appearance. It was good. A year later, the journalist podcaster creates an episode taking the other point of view from what this particular expert had said. And that expert now got very angry and upset and demanded that the episode be taken down and refused to have any indication of why the episode was taken down. Didn't want anything. Completely sanitize my name and appearance and everything from your websites or else. Well, client didn't act fast enough. Client tried to include some kind of an explanation so audience members wouldn't see this missing empty hole in the feed. And so the guest sued the client for millions of dollars, claiming, all kinds of deception and misrepresentation and fraud and defamation and copyright infringement and all those kinds of things. So that's the cautionary tale. Had this client had the guest sign a release, this wouldn't have happened. It wouldn't have had its day in court. Let's put it that way. All right. So a good release isn't something that's static. It should be something that you evolve as your show evolves. If you add video, update. If you start using AI tools, update the episode, update the agreement. If you're translating into other languages, add that language authorizing that now. And here's something that most people forget. Make sure the release covers your entire production team. If you've got a co-host, an editor, or a producer, the release should make clear that the rights extend to everyone involved in producing and distributing the show. That will help avoid confusion if the team changes later on. Rather than naming individual people, you name the company and all of the people involved in the production. So here's your big takeaway. A guest release is one of those small, unglamorous details that separates the hobbyists from the professionals. If it's sort of your permission slip, your liability shield, and your creative freedom guarantee all in one. So here's the simple checklist. Get a release and get it signed before you record. Keep good records, keep it in your files, and use a proper form that covers all the modern production realities like multi-platform distribution, AI tools, and those kinds of things. If you do these things, you will sleep better knowing that your guest can't derail your show with as simple as an email, right? All right. So this is just one piece of the bigger legal foundation that every podcaster needs. And if you want to go deeper and make sure that you have got everything handled, from your business entity to your trademarks, your branding, your contracts, your monetization, all of that, I hope you'll check out my program. It's called Easy Legal for Podcasters, easylegalforpodcasters.com. And you can grab a free guest release from me that I've drafted specifically for podcasters. It's at podcastrelease.com. It's the exact lawyer-drafted form that I use and recommend to all my clients. It's fast, it's free, and it could save you a world of trouble. So I'm Gordon Firemark, the podcast lawyer. This has been Legit Podcast Pro. Hope you'll join me next week and the week after, because we're going to be doing some holiday-oriented specials around the ideal gifts for your podcaster friends and the gift guide and wish list, I guess you could call it. And we have a free membership community that you can join, legitpodcastpro.com. Come on in there, join up, and be a part of it to communicate and share ideas, strategies, wins, challenges, all of that. And you have access to me to ask me your questions. And who knows, maybe your question will become a part of a future episode of this show, Legit Podcast Pro. So legitpodcastpro.com, join the membership community. I hope you'll join in, and I look forward to seeing you there. Until then, keep on creating, keep on growing, and keep things legit and legal. But most of all, keep on creating.